أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا البلد آمنا واجنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام رب إنهن أضللن كثيرا من الناس فمن تبعني فإنه مني ومن عصاني فإنك غفور رحيم. ربنا إني أسكنت من ذريتي بواد غير ذي زرع عند بيتك المحرم ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة فاجعل أفئدة من الناس تهوي إليهم وارزقهم من الثمرات لعلهم يشكرون. ربنا إنك تعلم ما نخفي وما نعلن وما يخفى على الله من شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء. الحمد لله الذي وهب لي على الكبر الحمد لله الذي وهب لي على الكبر إسماعيل وإسحاق إن ربي لسميع الدعاء. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ولا تحسبن الله غافلا عما يعمل الظالمون إنما يؤخرهم ليوم تشخص فيه الأبصار. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہ بات ہرگز نہ بھول جانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. جہان صبر و رضا یہی ہے، خدائے صبر و رضا یہی ہے. یہاں پہ آتے ہیں چل کے مہدی، بہشت زہرا یہ سرزمین ہے. اور یہاں ہے زہرا کا نہ جانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. دعائیں دیں گے حسین تم کو، اور یہاں پہ آنسو اگر بہائے، یہاں پہ بیٹی نے بے وطن کی ستم گروں سے تماچے کھائے. یہاں پہ خوشیوں کو بھول جانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہاں پہ گزری ہے وہ قیامت، ملا نہ اس کو سکون اب تک. ردائے چھننے کے غم میں عابد لحد میں روتا ہے خون اب تک. ارے یہاں پہ ہرگز نہ مسکرانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے. کہیں پہ قاسم ہوئے ٹکڑے، کہیں پہ زی سے گرے تھے مولا، کہیں سکینہ سموں سے لپٹی، کہیں پہ اصغر نے تیر کھا یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے، یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ بات ہرگز نہ بھول جانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے، یہاں سنبھل کر قدم اٹھانا، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے، یہ کربلا ہے۔
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات، اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد وعلی غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، دیکھنا ایک دن شام کی قید سے تجھ کو آ کر چھڑائیں گے بابا، تجھ کو آ کر چھڑائیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، لوریاں آ کے تجھ کو سنائیں گے، پھر اپنے سینے پہ تجھ کو سلائیں گے، پھر زخم جتنے ملے شام کی قید سے ان پہ مرہم لگائیں گے بابا، ان پہ مرہم لگائیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، روز کرتی تھی زنداں میں آہو بکا، جانے کب قید خانے سے ہوں گے رہا، پورا ہو جائے گا یہ جو ارمان تھا، کربلا سے جو آئیں گے بابا، کربلا سے جو آئیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، اپنے بابا کو جب بھی بلاتی تھی تم، تازیانے لینوں کے کھاتی تھی تم، ان اندھیروں سے اب جان چھٹ جائے گی، ساتھ لے کر جو جائیں گے بابا، ساتھ لے کر جو جائیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، کربلا میں ملیں گے چچا جان بھی، غم یتیمی کے ان کو سنانا سبھی، جانے کب سے یہاں پیاسی قیدی ہے تو، تجھ کو پانی پلائیں گے بابا، تجھ کو پانی پلائیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا۔ نوح مظہر یہ عمران کیسے پڑھے، دل تڑپنے لگا اشک بہنے لگے، غم زدہ بیٹی سے ماں یہ کہتی رہی، تجھے لینے کو آئیں گے بابا، تجھے لینے کو آئیں گے بابا، غم نہ کر میری بالی سکینہ، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا، تیرے سب غم مٹائیں گے بابا۔ بار دیگر صلوات، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم۔ الفاتحہ۔
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان اللعین الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، الحمد للہ رب العالمین، الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم واشكروا لله إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. The last question that we want to look at the end of these series of lectures is the question, where do we go from here? And inshallah tonight this is the question that we will be talking about. Of course, before talking about the future and what we expect to do in the future and where we expect to go from here, we need to remind ourselves about where we are presently and where we have come from. And we need to express gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal for all the blessings that He has bestowed upon us. Indeed, showing gratefulness and being thankful is something that is part of human nature, and that is why we find that even those who are not believers, even those who don't believe in God and who are atheists, they also express gratitude when somebody does something good for them, because this is part of our nature, to show gratitude and to be thankful to anyone who does good to us. And Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed us with so many blessings, so it behooves us first and foremost to express our gratitude when we see ourselves in a position of being believers in Allah Azza wa Jal, in being followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We thank Allah Azza wa Jal for giving us opportunities like this where we commemorate the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, and at the same time speak about the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Remind ourselves about the teachings of Islam as has come to us through the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Of course, when we talk about gratitude and showing thankfulness, there are three types of gratitude. There is verbal gratitude, where you verbally express your thankfulness. If somebody does something good for you, you say thank you, asante sana, shukran, khayli mamnoon. All these are examples of verbal gratitude, where you express your thankfulness using words and speech. The second kind of gratitude is gratitude through action, where you show thankfulness for a blessing by your actions. For example, we are told in Islam that this is the kind of gratitude that is expected of believers. When Allah Azza wa Jal gives you a blessing, the gratitude for that blessing is supposed to be shown through actions. For example, if you have been blessed with knowledge, the gratitude and the shukr for that knowledge is that you give it to others. You impart that knowledge to those who want to learn from you. Similarly, if you have been given the blessing of wealth, the gratitude for that is that you help the needy when they need your assistance. And if you have been given authority, then you use that blessing of authority to make peace between brothers, between members of the society who are quarreling with one another. These are practical ways of showing gratitude for the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal. So the second kind of gratitude is a gratitude through action. And the third kind of gratitude is where now you inform others about the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal. You inform others about the favors that have been done to you. The Holy Quran says, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. As for the bounties of Allah, as for the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal, speak about them, declare them, tell the people about them. Why? Because in doing so, you yourself are showing that you appreciate Allah's bounties, and maybe by doing so, others may be guided towards Allah Azza wa Jal. And when we talk about gratitude and when we talk about thankfulness, then usually gratitude is proportional to the favor that one receives. For example, if somebody gives you a small gift, gifts you a pen, for example, you will say, thank you very much, what a beautiful gift. Somebody else comes and gifts you a laptop, mashallah, an expensive gift, you will be more thankful. Somebody on the other hand comes and gifts you a house. Here, I'm giving you the whole house, it is yours as a gift. How much thankfulness and gratitude you will have for that very generous gift. Now imagine if somebody gifts you their kidney. You need a kidney and somebody is willing to give you their kidney. How much gratitude you will have to that person. Probably the rest of your life you will feel indebted to that person, and you will show that person your gratitude. They saved your life by giving you part of their body, by giving you their kidney. Now look at Allah Azza wa Jal, how much blessings and bounties He has given us. We are told, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you try and count the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal, you will not be able to count them. Countless blessings. So how much gratitude do we owe to Allah Azza wa Jal? How thankful must we be to Allah Azza wa Jal? Yet the Quran tells us, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. Very few of my servants are grateful to me. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِرَبِّهِ لَكَنُودٌ. Indeed, the human being is ungrateful to his Lord. Allahu Akbar. Despite all the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal, we as human beings many times neglect to show gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is something that we need to consider. It is something that we need to think about. And only when we are grateful to Allah, when we express our gratitude to Allah, then we can now think about what we will do in the future. Be grateful for the past, be grateful for the present, and that will then affect the future. Obviously, when we talk about gratitude in Islam, as a side note, it is important to remember that gratitude is also due to other human beings who do good to you, not only to Allah. In fact, a tradition tells us, "Man lam yashkuril makhluq, lam yashkuril khaliq." One who does not thank the creation does not thank the creator. And so it is important, therefore, for us to be thankful to Allah Azza wa Jal, and at the same time we should be thankful to those amongst the human beings, amongst the creatures who do good to us. And one of the advantages of gratitude and thankfulness to Allah Azza wa Jal is the promise of increase. Allah says in the Holy Quran, وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. In Surah Ibrahim, Allah says that the proclamation has been made from your Lord that if you are grateful, I will surely increase my bounties for you. But if you are ungrateful, then my adhab and my punishment is severe. It is interesting how the opposite of shukr is kufr. Kufr, a word which is also used for disbelief, but it is also a word that means ungratefulness, and it is the opposite of gratitude. Now, when we are talking about where to go from here, the first thing that we need to preserve and enhance is our iman. Before we can think about the future, we need to think about how we can improve ourselves, and in doing so, then we are securing our future, not only in this world, but in the hereafter as well. And so a person might ask, but I am already a mu'min, I already have iman, I already believe. Well, iman is not only of one level. There are countless levels of iman. There are different stages of iman. So even if a person is a mu'min, there is still room to improve and to strengthen your iman. The Holy Quran tells us in Surah An-Nisa, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, aminu billahi wa rasulih. O you who believe, believe in Allah and His Prophet. And then the verse continues. That means those who have iman are told to have iman. And scholars therefore say that this means that they are told to increase their iman, to enhance their iman, to become stronger in their belief. And so there is always a room for improvement and for strengthening one's faith and one's iman. So this is very important when it comes to iman and the different levels of iman. If we want to think about our future, first and foremost we have to strengthen our iman. It is reported, for example, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih had a horse by the name of Murtajaz. Murtajaz, some scholars say, because the neighing of that horse and the sound that the horse made was melodical. And so it was kind of a rajaz that the horse was singing when it neighed. And so it was called Murtajaz. It was a very beautiful white horse. This horse was bought by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi from one of the Bedouins of Banu Murrah. And it is said that after the Prophet had already struck a deal and bought the horse, when the time came for the Bedouin to deliver the horse to Rasulullah, he began saying that I have not sold the horse to the Prophet. He is making it up. And so at that moment, a witness was required who could testify that the Prophet had bought the horse from this man. But the Prophet had bought the horse when there were no witnesses. Yet Khuzaymah ibn Thabit comes and passes by, and when he hears this, he says, I bear witness and I give testimony that the Prophet has bought this horse. So the Prophet says, how do you give testimony? How do you bear witness? He says, بِتَصْدِيقِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, because I bear witness to your truthfulness, O Rasulullah. I know that you would never lie. So for me, your word is sufficient. If you say that you have bought this horse, I can easily testify to it, even though I was not present when you bought the horse. And so the Prophet is so pleased with him that he makes Khuzaymah dhu shahadatain, that the testimony of Khuzaymah is equal to that of two people. And it became famously known amongst the companions of Rasulullah that Khuzaymah is dhu shahadatain. His single testimony is equal to two testimonies. The level of his iman was such that he was ready to accept the words of Rasulullah without question, without doubt. That was the level of Khuzaymah ibn Thabit. Of course, Khuzaymah was also one of the close friends of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and he fought by the side of Imam Ali alayhi salam in the Battle of Siffin, where he was martyred. And so this is one example of Iman and the level of Iman and the level of faith and belief that a person can have, and this is something that we should aspire to. We should try and work hard at reforming ourselves and strengthening our Iman. And in doing so, then we can guarantee a bright future for ourselves and inshallah for our community as well. Now, when we are talking about our future and where we want to go from here, meaning what we expect to do in the future, we need to be people of vision, we need to be people of insight, we need to think about future generations just as we think about ourselves. It is not sufficient for us to secure our own future and that of our immediate families. We need to think about future generations. What will happen to our community 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road, and we need to plan for that. We need to think about that. Of course, at the end of the day, Allah Azza wa Jal is the planner and He is the one who will decide. But as much as we can, we need to prepare and we need to take steps to ensure that there is a thriving community in the future, a community of believers. And one way to do this is to train our children, to train the next generation and to teach them about Islam. Of course, the way in which we were taught about Islam is very different from the way that the current generation needs to be taught about Islam. There are many tools that we can use that may be beneficial to enable us to teach Islam to the new generation. We know that the new generation, the Z generation as some people refer to it, the Zoomer generation, these young people have many problems that we did not have, and they have many comforts that we did not have, and these comforts also come at a price. For example, we have problems like attention deficit disorders, where the young people can hardly focus on anything for longer than a few minutes, if not a few seconds. So this is something that is a problem for us. And at the same time, we have discipline problems where we find the younger generation no longer shows respect for the elders the way we were trained to show respect for the elders. And so all these problems are there in the community, and we need to address these problems. We need to face these problems in order to be able to secure our future. One of the tools we can use is the tool of creativity. We now have to expend extra effort in trying to be creative when we teach our younger generation about religion. We can no longer afford to use the same old methods in teaching religion to the young generation. Creativity is important, and it is not that our ulama and our scholars have never used creativity. We have many examples of creative arguments being used that would attract people towards the faith. For example, in his book Al-Milal wal-Nihal, Ash-Shahristani gives a very creative kind of imaginary debate that takes place between Iblis, between Shaitan and Allah Azza wa Jal, where Iblis is trying to debate with Allah Azza wa Jal, and he is trying to ask Allah theological questions like, if you knew that I am going to become evil, why did you create me, and things like that. And using this imaginary debate and using this kind of imaginary discourse, Shahristani presents theological questions in a very creative manner. Of course, scholars who came later then also expounded upon this and presented answers to the questions that Iblis posed to Allah, which they took from the Holy Quran and also from the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so using this kind of creativity, one can easily present issues in a manner that is appealing to the curious minds. Another thing that we need to keep in mind when we want to teach the young people about Islam is we need to take the situation of the individual into consideration. Many times we don't take the situation of the young people into account. We try and train them the way we were trained, and we try and use general concepts without thinking about how sometimes general concepts and general ideas do not apply to every situation. Even the general teachings of Islam do not apply to every situation, and there are some exceptions. So we have to take the situation into account. For example, we know that haste is something that is bad. Don't be hasty, we are told. The Quran even tells us not to be hasty. فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ. Don't be hasty. The traditions also tell us not to be hasty. We have so many ahadith that talk about the detrimental effects of haste. However, we find, for example, that at one time Musa alayhi salam made haste. The ayah reads, وَمَا أَعْجَلَكَ عَنْ قَوْمِكَ يَا مُوسَى قال هم أولئي على أثري وعجلت إليك ربي لترضى. When Musa alayhi salam was bringing a group of the elders of the Bani Israel up the mountain to the place where he was communicating to Allah Azza wa Jal, he made haste and went up quicker than them. And Allah Azza wa Jal asks him, ما أعجلك عن قومك? What prompted you to hasten ahead of your people and to come quicker than your people? Why were you hasty, O Musa, in coming up to meet me? And Musa alayhi salam says, they are close by, they are soon coming, but I made haste to come to you, O my Lord, so that you may be pleased with me. That means there are certain times when haste is good. For example, if you want to do a good deed, don't procrastinate, don't delay, don't be sluggish and slow. Be quick about it. Make haste in doing good. And so we find that even the general principles and rules are subject to exceptions. There are exceptions for all these rules, and therefore in every case the situation has to be taken into account. A third thing that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about training our future generation is the question of peers and friends. It is very important that a good environment is maintained where the friend circle are good and those with whom the young people interact are righteous people, are good people, because the effects of bad friends is something so detrimental that it can change a person from belief to disbelief. It can take away a person from the right path. And the Holy Quran describes this beautifully when it says that on the Day of Judgment some people will express their regret because of the type of friends that they kept in the world. And they will say, Ya laytani lam attakhidh fulanan khalila, laqad adallani an al-dhikri ba'da idh ja'ani, wa kana ash-shaytanu lil-insani khadhula. Woe be to me, I wish I hadn't taken so and so as a friend. He took me away from the right path and he led me astray after the reminder had come to me. And indeed, shaitan is a deserter of man. And so we find that that kind of regret will be expressed by those individuals who had bad friends in this world. And furthermore, we are told that the kind of people we associate with are the kinds of people whom we will be raised with on the day of judgment. We are told in the riwayat, Man ahabba qawman hushira ma'ahum, wa man ahabba amala qawmin ushrika fi amalihim. Whoever loves a group of people will be raised with that group of people, and whoever likes the actions of a group of people will be a partner with them in their action. And so it is very important to control the kind of individuals our children interact with and the kind of individuals our children associate with. Another point that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about training our young people and teaching them about Islam is that it is important that we learn Islam from the right people. We have many individuals who portray themselves as learned scholars, but in reality, they are not learned individuals. And even if they are learned, we find that they have the wrong aqidah, the wrong beliefs. And with the wrong beliefs, they misguide other people. And so we need to realize that not every person who can quote the Holy Quran or quote a few ahadith is a reliable scholar. It is very interesting in Nahjul Balagha, Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he talks about how the believers should argue or should debate with the Khawarij, he says, لا تخاصمهم بالقرآن فإن القرآن حمال ذو وجوه تقول ويقولون ولكن حاججهم بالسنة فإنهم لن يجدوا عنها محيصا. He says, do not debate them with the Quran, because the Quran has verses that can be misinterpreted. So they will also bring verses. As you bring verses, they will bring verses. Rather, if you want to debate them, then debate them with the Sunnah, because then they will have no way out. Of course, at that time, the Sunnah was well known to the people. Not like today when we have so many different ahadith. And of course we know that in order to interpret the ahadith, you need again scholars who can correctly interpret ahadith and distinguish between those that are authentic and those that are not. So it is important therefore that we realize that we have to first and foremost identify those individuals who are true scholars and who are godly and pious individuals, whose words guide people towards Allah Azza wa Jal, whose words remind people of the Akhirah and remind people of the bounties of Allah Azza wa Jal. These are the kinds of scholars whom we need to follow. Not those individuals who portray themselves as scholars, but they come and they twist talks in such a way that after you listen to them, all that you have in your heart is doubt. They fill your heart with doubt instead of belief. They fill your heart with misgivings instead of iman. And so those kinds of individuals, even if they may be learned individuals, they are the wrong kind of individuals to listen to and to follow. And we must protect our younger generation from these kinds of individuals. And these kind of individuals have existed in history from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alih. It is not a new phenomenon. During the time of the Prophet, there were some people who would attribute lies to Rasulullah. So much so that the Prophet had to come and one day announce openly that there are people who are attributing lies to me. Be careful. And so you can imagine during the life of Rasulullah, if there were some people who were doing this. Today, after 1400 years, when our Imam is not accessible to us, there are many people who are misguiding others in the name of religion and preaching religion. So it is very important for us to be careful and to follow the right kind of people, because it is our akhirah and it is our future. It is the future of our community in this dunya, and it is our future in the hereafter that is at stake. So it is something that we need to be extra careful about. Yet another point that we need to keep in mind when teaching Islam to the younger generation is that Islam is a very logical religion, and we too have to present it in a very logical manner. The younger generation is a generation that understands the language of logic, and Islam is a religion of logic. So let us present it in a logical manner. Look at the Holy Quran. The Quran itself in numerous instances presents logical arguments. For example, we are told, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا فسبحان الله رب العرش عما يصفون. In Surah Al-Anbiya, verse number 22, had there been any gods in them, meaning in the heavens and in the earth, besides Allah, they would surely have fallen apart. Clear is Allah, Lord of the throne, of what they allege against Him. So here, the Quran is presenting a logical argument to show that there can be only one true God. Because if there were many gods, then the heavens and the earth would fall apart. Every god would fight for supremacy, for power. And in this fight between the gods, the entire universe would fall apart. We can see this in the example of Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, they have different gods, and these different gods are many times at war with one another. And who suffers? The universe suffers, the creatures suffer, the human beings suffer. So if in reality there were many gods, then you would not see harmony in the universe. There would be discord and chaos in the universe. And so when we see that there is so much harmony in the universe, then this proves that there is only one God. What a beautiful, rational, logical argument that the Quran presents. In another verse we read, الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور. He created 7 heavens in layers. You do not see any discordance in the creation of the All-Beneficent. Look again. Do you see any flaw? Again, this is a beautiful rational argument where you are challenged to look at the universe and try and see any flaw, any discordance, any disharmony, anything that does not match. We find everything is harmonious. And when you see this with your own eyes, then you realize that Allah Azza wa Jal is a wise Lord, and He is the only true and most powerful creator who has created everything which is in harmony. What a beautiful, logical and rational point that the Quran presents. Again, in a third verse we find, when talking about the Holy Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Don't they ponder upon the Quran? If indeed this Quran was from other than Allah, they would find many discrepancies in it, contradictions in it. The Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. And over that period of time, there has been no contradiction. This itself proves that the Quran is from Allah. But the argument Allah is giving here is a logical argument, is a rational argument. So we find, and these are just 3 examples, there are many verses in the Quran that present rational and logical arguments. Furthermore, even when we turn to the ahadith of the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam, we find that numerous logical arguments have been presented. And the Imams would entertain all sorts of logical debates and arguments and questions. We find in the traditions questions such as, is it possible for Allah Azza wa Jal to put the entire universe inside an egg without expanding the egg or shrinking the universe? And the Imams would entertain these kinds of questions, and they would answer them in a manner that was satisfactory to the questioner. And so this is something that we find in Islam. Islam is a religion that is rational, that is logical, and it has to be presented in this way, especially to the younger generation. Furthermore, even the students of the Imams were taught how to debate with others using logical arguments. If you look at Hisham ibn Hakam, the student of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and you read his debates, you find they are all based on rational, logical arguments. And if a person uses these kinds of arguments to understand religion and to learn religion, then the faith that is based on logical reasoning will be a firm faith, and such a person will then not have doubts regarding religion. And this is very important as we think about where to go from here and we think about our future. Then we need to realize that our future in this dunya rests with our younger generation, and in order to keep them strong in their belief, we need to present it to them in a logical manner, and we need to use all these other tools that are at our disposal by which we can strengthen their iman and make them good and righteous believers, insha'Allah. Now, as we talk about the future, we have to also mention the fact that the future in this world for every individual is limited, because we are here for a few years, life is short, and eventually we die. And nobody can escape death. Death is that reality that is something which is inescapable. And that is why the Holy Quran tells us, كل نفس ذائقة الموت ثم إلينا ترجعون. Every soul shall taste death, and then you will all return back to us. And in another verse, very famously, we read, أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة. Wherever you are, death will reach you, even if you are in lofty towers and fortresses. This reminds us of an anecdote about a very powerful king who was told by the Prophet of his time the exact moment of his death. He was told, at such a time, on such a day, you will die. And so the king, being fearful of death, made all sorts of arrangements to try and remain safe so that he did not die on that day. On the day when he was supposed to die, he sent everyone out of the palace and kept only one bodyguard. He told the bodyguard to stand outside the balcony of his room as he stayed inside his room. And as the clock ticked and the time came closer, he kept becoming more and more anxious. And it is said just a few seconds before the fated time, he goes out into the balcony curiously to find out if anyone had tried to climb into the palace. And as he approaches the guard, and the guard hears footsteps behind him, he swings his axe and beheads the king. So the king dies at that very moment that was predicted by the Prophet, and he is killed by the same guard whom he had kept there to protect his life. So death is something inescapable, and no matter what we do, we cannot run away from our death, and we will one day die. So we need to spend the few years we have in this world preparing for the hereafter, which is what we have been created for. We have been created for the hereafter, not for this dunya. And so we need to be careful about how we spend our time in this world. When we think about the future, it should not be only the future in this world, rather it should be the ultimate future, which is our future in the akhirah. And one way in which we can secure our future in the akhirah is by continuously remembering death. Remember the fact that one day we will die. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has a beautiful tradition in which he says, ذِكْرُ الْمَوْتِ يُمِيتُ الشَّهَوَاتِ. The remembrance of death kills a person's vain desires and base desires. And so by remembering death, we are taken away from desiring this dunya, which is something very good, because then that will keep us on the straight path. So as we think about our future, let us constantly remember death and pray for the best death, that we die in this world as believers. For indeed, those who die as disbelievers will face a very painful death, according to the Holy Quran. The Quran says, فكيف إذا توفتهم الملائكة يضربون وجوههم وأدبارهم. How will it be for the disbelievers when death comes to them as the angels strike them on their faces and their backs? You will be taken away from this world in a very painful fashion if you are a disbeliever. And so this is something that we need to think about. Rather, we pray to Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us the best death. The best death obviously being the death of martyrdom, like the martyrdom of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. What an honorable death, what a beautiful death, a death that gave life to Islam. Islam is alive today because of the martyrdom of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Look at the beautiful hadith from Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, in which he describes the best death. It is said, somebody asked Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, Ma khayru ma yamutu alayhi al-abd. What is the best state in which a servant may die? قال أن يكون قد فرغ من أبنيته ودوره وقصوره. He said the best death is when one has left his occupation with his houses and his buildings and his palaces. قيل وكيف ذلك? The questioner asks, and how can one do that? قال أن يكون من ذنوبه تائبا وعلى الخيرات مقيما يرد على الله حبيبا كريما. He says one does that by having repented for all his sins and being a person who continuously does good. And when he does this, then when he goes back to Allah Azza wa Jal, he will come as a beloved of Allah and one who is honored by Allah Azza wa Jal. We pray to Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us all a death that is the way Imam has described here, a death of one who has been forgiven of all his sins and one who is always upon the path of righteousness, so that when we too come before our beloved Creator Allah Azza wa Jal, He honors us and accepts us into His presence, insha'Allah ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. The 12th night of Muharram is the night in which we remember the masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, specifically how they depart from Karbala, because now the household of Rasulullah, the Ahlul Bayt, have to depart from Karbala, and they have to leave behind all the shuhada and the martyrs of Karbala, as they are chained, as they are tied in ropes and taken from Karbala to Kufa and Kufa to Sham. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, being the only man who survives from the battle, he is shackled in such a merciless manner. We are told that he is made to wear a collar, but not an ordinary collar. In those days, they used to make people wear metal collars with sharp, pointy edges facing outside, but Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam is made to wear the same collar, but with the sharp edges pointing inside so that it pierces his neck. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, he tells us that when he was giving ghusl to his father after his death, he could still see the effects of the marks of the collar on his neck and the shackles that were placed on his hands and feet. Allah, Allah. The dhulm did not stop after Ashura. So much dhulm was done on the Ahlul Bayt even after Ashura. We are told as the caravan was prepared, now who is there to keep the ladies on the mahmil? Do you remember how when they left Medina, Abbas and Ali Akbar came to help the women folk climb the mahmil? Now who is there? Zainab does it alone. She comes forward and helps the women on the camels, but this time the camels don't have the mahmil. This time camels don't even have saddles. The women are tied in ropes and they have to sit on the saddle-less camels. But now after Zainab Kubra helps everyone climb on their camels, she is left alone. Who will help Zainab? At that moment, Imam Zainul Abidin with all his shackles comes forward. Oh my aunt, I will help you on the camel. He helps Zainab Kubra come on the camel. Ajrukum ala Allah, ajrukum ala Allah. We are told as the caravan starts going towards Kufa, they pass by the Maqtal. They pass by the place where the bodies of the shuhada are kept, and when Zainab sees the body of Abu Abdullah, she cannot help herself. We are told she falls from her camel. Her hands are tied, and she falls on the hot sands of Karbala and comes next to the body of Abu Abdullah. And she says to Allah, oh Allah, accept this sacrifice from us. ربنا تقبل منا هذا القربان. Finally, the caravan is taken to Kufa. When the caravan reaches Kufa, and it was a very different scene. Whenever Zainab would come to Kufa before, she would come as a princess, the daughter of the Khalifa, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and Imam would ensure she comes in with nobody watching her in the dark of night, accompanied by Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein. But this time when Zainab comes to Kufa, Ibn Ziyad has organized all the riffraff and the hooligans of Kufa as they are brought in. Some people throw stones and trash on them. Allah, Allah. Is this the way the family of Rasulullah are treated? Allah, Allah. And we are told that finally they enter into the court of Ibn Ziyad. When Ibn Ziyad sees Imam Zainul Abidin, he asks, who is this man? I thought all the men were killed in Karbala. Who is this man? He is told, this is Ali ibn al-Hussein. When he hears that this is the son of Abu Abdullah, he says, kill him. At that moment, Zainab Kubra steps forward and says, how dare you? You cannot kill him. You will have to go through me first. And Zainab was protecting Imam Zainul Abidin. What a day has come. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
O my infant Ali Asghar, remember the words of your mother. Tomorrow when you soar to the heaven and meet your grandmother, to be cuddled and snuggled in her lap, insist no more. Broken already are her ribs from the nails of the door. Conceal the wound of the three-pronged arrow in your tiny neck. O Asghar, conceal the wound of the three-pronged arrow in your tiny neck, for Zahra has to still bear the gruesome cuts of the dagger in Hussein's neck. Abad wallah ya Zahra, ma nansa Husseina. It is our promise, O Zahra, we will never forget your Hussein.
رات نہ ڈلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب. اے رات نہ ڈلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب. بھائی سے دم صبح بچھڑ جائے گی زینب. اے رات نہ ڈھلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب. سونے دے سکینہ کو کہ پھر سو نہ سکے گی.
رونے بھی جو چاہے گی تو پھر رو نہ سکے گی.
اصغر سے ملاقات تو پھر ہو نہ سکے گی. اے رات نہ ڈھلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب. گھبرائے ہوئے لال ہے سہمی ہوئی مائیں.
جی بھر کے میں دے لوں علی اکبر کو دعائیں.
لینا ہے ابھی اون محمد کی بلائیں. اے رات نہ ڈلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب، اے رات بکھر جا تیرے بس میں ہو جہاں تک،
مٹ جائیں گے کل آلے پیمبر کے نشاں، باقی ہے یہ منظر علی اکبر کی اذاں تک، اے رات نہ ڈلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب، ہر چاند کے بچوں کی ابھی پیاس ہے باقی، کچھ آنکھ میں حسرت ہے تو کچھ آس ہے باقی،
لیکن میرا بھائی میرا عباس ہے باقی، اے رات نہ ڈھلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب، باقی ہے ابھی آل محمد کا سفینہ،
بیٹی کے سلانے کو ہے شبیر کا سینہ،
جھولا علی اصغر کا جھلاتی ہے سکینہ، اے رات نہ ڈلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب، کل کون سنے گا یہ میری آہ و بکا بھی،
ہوگا تہ خنجر میرا بھائی کا گلا بھی،
خیمہ تو کجا سر پہ نہ ہوگی یہ ردا بھی، اے رات نہ ڈلنا کہ اجڑ جائے گی زینب، بائی سے دم صبح بچھڑ جائے گی زینب،
آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا، آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا، آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا، زینب و کلثوم کا ہے، زینب و کلثوم کا ہے، سر کھلا ہے سر کھلا، آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا، آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا، زینب و کلثوم کا ہے، زینب و کلثوم کا ہے سر کھلا ہے سر کھلا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا شمر کا خیام میں یوں آ کے چادر چھیننا شمر کا خیام میں یوں آ کے چادر چھیننا ہم نہ بھولیں گے کبھی بھی ہم نہ بھولیں گے کبھی بھی واہی جابا کی صدا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا زینب و کلثوم کا ہے زینب و کلثوم کا ہے سر کھلا ہے سر کھلا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا سفر ہے دشوار اتنا بیبیاں ماتم کنا سفر ہے دشوار اتنا بیبیاں ماتم کنا خون آنکھوں سے رواں ہے خون آنکھوں سے رواں ہے قافلہ سالار کا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا زینب و کلثوم کا ہے زینب و کلثوم کا ہے سر کھلا ہے سر کھلا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا آل احمد جنگلوں میں بیردا ہے بیردا بیردا ہے بیردا
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا علي الزين العابدين ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى القادم وعلي الرضا ومحمد تقي وعلي النقي والحسن العسكري ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وكابة الإيمان وإمامنا وإمام الإنس والجن عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره ورحمة الله وبركاته